Yes, indeed. Classic Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart, the classic years. It might be difficult to take him seriously, after the bum wigging, the antics and the interesting hairstyles and the Great American Songbook, but there was a time in the early 70s when the Caledonian Cockney was responsible for some of the greatest recordings ever made. It is the subject of a new book called Rod Stewart, the Classic Years. It's by Sean Egan. Delighted to say Sean's live on the line now. Good afternoon to you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It seems strange, doesn't it? Because a lot of people will only know him from sort of Do You Think I'm Sexy and Hot Legs and through the Great American Songbook and all that sort of bits and pieces. And they might not actually sort of get how great he still is, but at the early 70s, my goodness.
Oh, yeah, nobody was more street cred than Rod Stewart from around about 69 to 73-ish. And in fact, there was a famous quote from a rock critic called Paul Nelson, who said he was the Bruce Springsteen of his day. No rock star seemed more down to earth than Rod Stewart did in that period.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because he has always been an out-and-out rocker. I mean, in terms of that early part. I mean, obviously, Do You Think I'm Sexy is disco, but he never, we never had sort of Rod Stewart the psychedelic or the Rod Stewart the prog, did we? It was always based in London sort of street blues, wasn't it?
Yeah, he started out in the blues scene, although in his heart he's always admitted he was a bit of a folky. He was hugely influenced by Bob Dylan's first album, and he used to be a busker actually, and he used to perform songs solo with his guitar. So it sort of got drifted into blues because of Long John Baldry, who was a friend of his. And then, of course, he became a quintessential Stonesy rocker in the Faces, a very similar band to the Stones in a way. But in fact, that sort of smorgasbord informs those early albums he made for the Mercury label. It's a unique synthesis of so many different kinds of music.
Yeah, what I love, because I've had the great honour and great pleasure of interviewing Kenny Jones on a couple of occasions, and it was just that you can say smorgasbord. It seemed that everybody was playing in everybody else's bands at some point, or they're all hanging out together. And the Faces, as I've often said, was a drinking club with a band attached.
Yeah, although that sort of worked to their detriment. I mean, it created this great live bonhomie and made them one of the greatest live attractions in the world. But when it came to the studio, they didn't really have the work ethic that their talents deserved, and so they'd want to get down the pub as quickly as possible. So and Kenny admits this, that the Faces should have worked harder in the studio, and then maybe their albums would have been good as the solo albums that Rod was putting out at the same time.
I mean, he already obviously put solo albums out as well. I mean, 68, isn't it, Rod Stewart with Handbags and Glad Rags, I think, if I'm correct?
69, his first album came out. And around about the same time, he decided to join the Faces, which is an interesting sort of exercise in hedging your bets. If you've got a solo deal, why would you suddenly decide to join a band? Obviously, the remnants of the Small Faces and Ronnie Wood, who he'd worked with in the Jeff Beck group. So, and Billy Gaff, who I interviewed, he said to me, Rod at that time wasn't that interested in his solo career. He was more interested in the Faces, and he thought that was where his future lay in terms of success. But it didn't quite work out like that.
No, not at all. I mean, I played Every Picture Tells a Story from the beginning. I mean, regarded by many as his finest work, coming out of 1971, taking everybody by surprise.
Yeah, I mean, that's the title track of that album, and I think it's literally one of the 10 best albums ever made in the history of popular music. You can put it up there with anything by the Stones or the Beatles or the Hendrix or the Clash or the Who, whoever you want to. It deserves its place alongside any of the rock canon. And
so, from there, I mean, if you think about what everybody else is doing, I mean, he's doing his solo stuff. There's a lot of sort of singer-songwriter folk stuff. You've got Marriott doing Humble Pie, Vinegar Joe's coming on. But so, what was it that made Rod at this point so successful, do you think?
Well, obviously he's got that inimitable voice. that lovely raspy delivery. It's not to everybody's taste, by the way. I mean, to this day, you'll get people saying, "Oh God, I can't stand Rod Stewart's voice. It's like sandpaper." But of course, to other people, that's the attraction of it. And he knows how to sell a song as well. He knows how to phrase it and the emphasis to put on words. So the voice, first and foremost, I guess, is the attraction. But then he was very good at selecting songs. He wasn't a prolific songwriter ever. I mean, that track that you just played, obviously he wrote that. And but he only wrote about half of the songs on his solo albums, which in those days was very unusual. The Beatles had made it almost de rigueur to do all of your own stuff, maybe one cover version on an album, but half of his albums would be cover versions. But because his songs were so great, and because he selected songs well, and because he sang them well, and because the musicians he selected were fantastic musicians, somehow it all worked, and he sort of got a get-out-of-jail card from rock critics because of it. They would probably look down on other people in the sense of if another artist wasn't able to produce more than half their album, write more than half their album, they would consider them a minor artist. But in Rod Stewart's case, he was absolutely loved by the critics.
Yeah, I suppose one of the things is because the voice is so different, it's like Joplin's. You don't mind them giving because it gives the song a whole new treatment. If you're doing an exact carbon copy, you're doing a Bublé, if you like, then what's the point? But if you're doing it with Rod's voice, then it's, it's a whole new world opens up.
Yeah, I mean, anybody can do a cover version, that's easy, but if you've got that God-given gift to sing it maybe even better than the original artist, then you really are blessed.
We can't talk about the classic years without talking about, in your opinion, are we going up to 76? Are we going to 77? Because we've got, obviously, stateside as well. He becomes this huge star, and tracks later on come out like Do You Think I'm Sexy, Sailing, etc. Do you think the nub of his, before he goes all disco and does, Baby Jane, etc., and goes West Coast? Yeah.
I mean, there are some people who refuse to listen to anything he did after about 75. Obviously, he made the Atlantic Crossing album in 75. That was the first album he'd ever made where he didn't use his band that he used, this loose collection of musicians that he used on his solo albums, or any of the Faces. So that was a complete departure. It was a very glossy album as well. So, and a lot of people will say to you, that's it, that's the demarcation, and nothing he did after that is worthwhile. But I think that's more of a pose than an opinion. There's some great tracks. I don't think Atlantic Crossing is a great album, but it's got Sailing on it, which is a wonderful track. And the album he released the next year, A Night on the Town, that's got The Killing of Georgie, and other classic songs. And even when he was beginning to go on the slide, he could still pull it out of the hat. And you have songs like You're in My Heart, The Final Acclaim, which is just a beautiful love song. And you mentioned Do You Think I'm Sexy? I actually like that record. It's a thumpingly well played record, and it's not quite as icky as its title suggests it is, because that line doesn't actually appear in the song.
Yeah.
But it's, when it comes to disco, he decided to have a go. The Stones had a go. Why not him? They did Miss You. He did Do You Think I'm Sexy? They're not characteristic of either of the artists' work, but they are good records.
Yeah, and if you listen to Carmine Appice doing the drums there, and the band that he assembled for that 80s stuff up to Baby Jane, it's he does get great musicians around him, which is one of his strengths.
Yeah, it was a very, very slick band. Now, the band that he had on his Mercury albums, they weren't slick at all. They was quite ramshackle, very, very good players, but they didn't rehearse, and they were more about soul and emotion rather than virtuosity. So some people prefer that sort of scuffed sound. Some people prefer the honed sound. But I think he made, but as you say, the common element is very, very fine musicians.
Yeah, and if you think about it, though, I mean, he's going with the time, and commercial music has only really been going for 15 years at that point, so they're making it up as they go along, if you like. And record companies are kind of by the mid-70s beginning to get a handle on how to sort of produce great music, etc. And they want their artists to be a little bit polished, shall we say? And Rod has got onto the disco thing and has a huge hit. And perhaps the purists just go, it was better off when he was with Long John Baldry singing in the Eel and Pie, etc.
Oh yeah, I mean, he did become, his public persona changed more than his music. I mean, he did become this. He went from being this down-to-earth man of the people type of figure to somebody who really exulted in celebrity, and so he had that jet-setting period. He became a tax exile in '76, which didn't go down well with a lot of people. But then again, he was paying 90 pence in the pound income tax. So you can, and in those days, musicians, they didn't really think of a long career. They thought it would be over in 5 years. In fact, that's a comment that Ian McLagan said to me. Ian McLagan obviously had been in the Small Faces, and they'd had a separate career, if you like, before they became the Faces with Rod. And he found Rod reading his fan mail one day. And he sort of laughed at him because that's the kind of thing that he used to do, and he was no longer impressed by fan mail. And Max said to me, well, I'm convinced that Rod thought it was all going to end tomorrow.
So you can't, and Hollywood, the West Coast loves him. I mean, if you only have to look at, Atlantic Crossing, I remember seeing that in the vinyl collection of my parents, obviously, because it's that great album, the great album art. And Night on the Town borrows heavily from the great masters. And then you've got Footloose and Fancy Free, where he's looking pretty Californian, like he's having a lovely time. Yeah,
it's, although the worst one is Blondes Have More Fun, where he's pouting like a glamour person.
Yeah, that's the one. Sorry, yeah, I got confused with my thing. That's the one where he's giving it the full, hello there,
Yeah, I mean that was sort of the nadir of his narcissism. Although I did speak to Jim Cregan, who was in that the Rod Stewart band for those albums. And I asked him about this bum wiggling shtick that he did on stage, which I have to say was very, very. It was very unusual at the time. No male rock star had done that before. That sort of male tart persona. And Jagger.
Sorry, yes, you just nailed it. I hadn't thought about that before, but you absolutely nailed it. Yeah.
I mean, it was mortifying to some of the public at the time because they just weren't used to men behaving like that, even though Jagger had done a little bit of that. But then Jagger was sort of the sort of enemy of convention, and the Stones were the enemies of convention, so it sort of made sense with them. But Rod did that shtick, and I asked Cregan about it, and he said, "Well, look, Rod never takes himself seriously. We just thought of it as fun, and he's absolutely adamant that Rod's ego wasn't as huge as that shtick made it appear."
So when you speak to people about the time, I mean, if there's a wide crowd, as I said, you spoke to Cregan, Kenny Jones, and one of Stewart's then girlfriends, which must have been an interesting one as well during that time. Yeah,
I spoke to Dee Harrington. She met Rod in the early 70s, and she was with him until the mid-70s when he took up with Britt Eklund. So she saw him. He was just on the cusp of superstardom when they met, and so she saw a superstar in the making. And the interesting thing is, she said Rod was down to earth for several years before that period where we've just been talking about, where he was sort of drunk on fame. He basically, and it was down really to just not having time to become conceited, because he had his solo albums to make, he had the Faces albums to make, he had to go on tour with the Faces, he had to do promotion for his stuff and the Faces stuff. So basically he was living in the studio or living on the road, and he just didn't have time to do anything. He remained down to earth as well, because he'd go and see his family every Sunday. He'd play football with his local team, the Red Wings, who were from North London, where he comes from. And then he'd go up to his mum and dad's and have the roast beef dinner. You know, so it was a very contained, constricted life, and it didn't really lend itself to jet setting. That's something that came in a bit later.
Yeah, but at the same time, I suppose, because Rod just played a concert this summer, not 100 miles from the studio. He, in Marbella, because he's got a place here, and he's got a long association with this place where I'm broadcasting from. And one of the things that the audience has always thought they kind of know Rod Stewart. They've kind of grown with him, and he's, you think he's one of us, because he's not a Townsend. He's not a Jagger. You kind of think that Rod, because because he's relatively, he's had these wild years in LA, but he's come back and he's almost this national treasure now.
Yeah, he's still got that certain Jack the Lad persona, even when he was flaunting his wealth and his celebrity connections. It's sort of like the ragamuffin finding himself in heightened circumstances, and he plays on that image. So there's always been something of the common touch about him, even though his early fans will say, well, he lost his bearings and let the fame overtake him.
Yeah, but in a way, he may have lost his original. This period is brilliant. I mean, I kind of like Rod's stuff. I do like the early stuff. And if you look at sort of Elton John, and Bernie Taupin's got some tracks of he's written for Elton. And if you look at, I think the Elton John's original stuff from the 70s, Madman Cross the Water, Tumbleweed Connections, outstanding. And then come the 80s, I can absolutely leave it. So it is horses for courses, isn't it?
Well, that brings up another thing, because one of the reasons that I don't like Rod's stuff after, say, the early 80s is he moved with the times, and he embraced synthesizer technology and that sort of plasticky timbre that came in the 80s, and which is still there to this day in a lot of popular music. Now, personally speaking, that's not my bag, and that applies to a lot of people in my generation. Whereas if you say something like that to a younger person, they won't know what you're talking about. Because they've grown up with that sound. So you can give him kudos for moving with the times and embracing the new sounds, but for some of us, it just, no matter what the quality of the songs he happens to be writing, that particular sound is not to my personal taste.
Yeah, I mean, when Elton John went back and did Tiny Dancer with Britney Spears, I thought it was absolutely the work of Satan, but there you go. That's my own personal opinion.
And they were good mates for a long while, of course. They're both football lovers. They seem to have fallen out in recent years. There was some kind of spats that developed into a feud.
What, with Elton? Cuddly Elton? Who would have thunk it,
eh? I'm not sure what it was about, but yeah, they Rod actually, because they're both football fans, and of course Rod owned Watford Football Club at some time at one point, so that did give them a connection.
Elton owned Watford. No?
Elton did. And of course they're both two of the biggest recording artists of the 1970s. Absolutely. And Rod actually covered a song of Elton's on the second album, Country Comforts. It was on the Gasoline Alley album, and Elton actually admitted that Rod's version was better than his.
Interesting. What's your hope then that people will learn? It's appreciation of people who just think he is, the Great American Songbook, and Do You Think I'm Sexy, and Baby Jane, and there's a backstory, and there's this early stuff really is dynamite.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't even aware of the backstory in a way myself. I was in my teens in the early 80s. And I read it's a very famous article by Greil Marcus, who was a great American rock critic. It was in a Rolling Stone history of rock and roll. And he starts out this essay by saying, rarely has a singer had as full and unique and talent as Rod Stewart, and never has a singer betrayed that talent so completely. And now he's one of the sort of disillusioned people who hated everything he did from Atlantic Crossing onwards. But you read a sentence like that and you think, hold on a minute, this is Rod Stewart, who I only know from Do You Think I'm Sexy and the jet-setting lifestyle. He is supposed to have had this incredible talent, and that got me investigating Rod's back catalogue, and of course led me to some of the greatest music ever recorded. So I hope in a way this book will might have a similar effect on people.
Absolutely, and I still think it'll stay with me as well from the Faces is a brilliant rock and roller as well. The book is called The Classic Years, Rod Stewart's by Sean Egan. For those who think he was just a rock and roller, we're going to play out with, and I remember my parents playing this on an 8 track, so that dates me. There you go, Sean. We're going to play it out with The Killing of Georgie Part 1 and Part 2. But if people want to find you online, where can they find you?
Well, my website address is a bit long and complicated, but if they just write Sean Egan Journalist, it will take them to it.
Okay, we'll do that. The Sean Egan Journalist. The book is called Rod Stewart, The Classic Years. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks a lot.